Like he was not breathing. So I nudged him like, babe, wake up. And then he'd catch his breath. I'm like, dude, you just stopped breathing in your sleep. And I saved him.
There are names in basketball history that feel permanent, names carved into the sport so deeply that time itself seems unable to touch them. Shaquille O'Neal is one of those names. For NBA championships, 3 Finals MVP awards, 15 All-Star selections, and a Hall of Fame induction, the resume speaks in a language that needs no translation. For nearly 2 decades, he was not just a player. He was a force of nature in sneakers, a man whose footsteps shook arenas and whose presence rearranged the strategies of every opposing coach in the league. The nickname Superman was not given lightly. It was earned game after brutal game. But in 2026, the man behind that name is living a very different reality, and the story unfolding is one that even the most devoted fans may not be fully prepared to hear. To understand where Shaquille O'Neal stands today, you have to understand what it truly cost to be who he was on the court, standing at 7 feet and 1 inch, and playing at a weight that reached 325 pounds during his peak years, and reportedly climbed as high as 401 pounds at one point. Every movement O'Neal made carried consequences most athletes will never know. At his peak, the NBA center was 325 pounds, standing at 7'1", and he later told Logan Paul he had ballooned up to 401 pounds. That is not just size. That is a level of physical demand on joints, bones, and cartilage that compounds silently for years. Every thunderous dunk, every pivot in the post, every collision with defenders half his weight, it all left a positive damage that no championship ring could cancel out. The bill for that career came due in a very public way when O'Neal checked into a hospital and posted a photo from a hospital bed that alarmed fans worldwide. He quickly addressed the concern himself, explaining the situation with his signature humor, but the underlying reality was serious. The Basketball Hall of Famer explained he needed a hip replacement, and after updating fans, he wrote, "No need to worry, just had to get some BBL work, aka #hip replacement. Thanks and love you all." For a man whose hips had powered thousands of drives to the basket across a 19-year career, the surgery was both a medical necessity and a symbolic moment. The body presenting an invoice for decades of work done at the highest level imaginable, from the lingering effects of painkillers to his quest to get an 8-pack and even a hip surgery in between. Shaq has been increasingly open about the consequences of a 19-season-long NBA career. Since the surgery, he has been candid about the changes in how he moves and what he can no longer safely do. The explosive, high-impact athlete the world once cheered for now approaches his body with a caution and respect that he never needed to consider during his playing days. But the hip was only part of the picture. Something far more dangerous had been quietly working against him in the hours most people would never see, during sleep. In his own words, Shaq described waking up tired, waking up in the middle of the night, choking and gasping for air, and for a long time he resisted addressing it, because of what he called the superhuman mentality, the belief that he didn't need help, didn't need a doctor, didn't need to admit weakness. That mentality had served him on the court. In this case, it was putting his life at genuine risk. In a candid appearance on the debut episode of Craig Melvin's Glass Half Full, O'Neal revealed he is living with obstructive sleep apnea, a condition he's described in stark and alarming terms. Obstructive sleep apnea, or OSA, is a condition in which the airway becomes partially or fully blocked during sleep, disrupting breathing and preventing the body from getting the rest it needs, left untreated. It is associated with serious cardiovascular risks, including heart disease, stroke, and high blood pressure. The condition impacts an estimated 24 million people in the United States, many of whom are overweight or living with obesity, and often goes undiagnosed. For someone with O'Neal's physical profile, the risk was significant. It was reportedly his partner who first raised the alarm, becoming increasingly concerned that he sometimes stopped breathing during sleep, and an overnight sleep study ultimately confirmed the diagnosis. That confirmation was a turning point. Rather than keeping the struggle private, O'Neal made the choice to go public, not out of embarrassment or reluctant disclosure, but out of a genuine desire to reach people who might be ignoring the same warning signs he once ignored. In October 2025, he officially spearheaded a major initiative with Eli Lilly and Company to educate the public about moderate to severe obstructive sleep apnea, lending his name and personal story to a nationwide campaign. For the man who once made a career out of projecting invincibility, this was a striking and meaningful pivot. Now, he was using his platform not to project strength, but to model vulnerability, and in doing so, potentially saving lives. There's another dimension to his story that does not live in press releases or health campaigns. It lives in the quieter spaces of his personal life, in the relationships that fame both shaped and strained. Shaquille O'Neal's 9-year marriage to Shawnee Nelson, now Shawnee Henderson, produced 4 children but ultimately ended in 2011. His high-profile marriage to Shawnee O'Neal ended in 2011, largely due to his infidelity, and the experience left him with perspective on his own failures that he has only recently begun to articulate publicly. In conversations over the past year, particularly in his appearance on Craig Melvin's podcast, he has spoken with a level of honesty about that chapter of his life that reflects genuine reflection rather than public relations management. He admitted he was not always the perfect man in his relationship and in his marriage, and used that acknowledgement to frame his refusal to judge his own absent biological father. The parallel he draws between himself and the man who was not there for him is unexpectedly honest, and it reveals a man doing real emotional work, not just recounting a polished narrative. That biological father, Joseph Tony, is a complicated figure in Shaq's life story. Tony struggled with drug addiction and was imprisoned for drug possession when O'Neal was an infant, and upon his release he chose not to return to a parental role, instead agreeing to relinquish his parental rights to the man who would actually raise Shaquille, Sergeant Philip Arthur Harrison. Harrison, a career Army sergeant, became the defining male figure in Shaq's upbringing. He was strict, structured, and demanding, the kind of parent who does not do the disservice of making life easy. Under Harrison's guidance, O'Neal learned crucial life skills and was steered away from the path of a self-described rebellious juvenile delinquent, and Shaq has described him not as a stepfather, but simply as his father. The impact of that relationship on who Shaquille O'Neal became, as an athlete, as a professional, and as a man, cannot be overstated. Philip Arthur Harrison died of a heart attack on September 10, 2013. The loss hit O'Neal profoundly. In 2020, Shaq wrote on Instagram, "Because of you, SGD Philip A. Harrison, I fulfilled all my dreams. I know you resting easy, big man. Can't thank you enough. And don't worry, I got the family." That message, written years after Harrison's passing, speaks to a grief that did not dissolve with time, but instead deepened into something more permanent. A recognition of a debt that can never be repaid because the person whom is owed is no longer there to receive it. When the man who gave you your compass is gone, you navigate differently. Every decision carries a different weight. Every quiet moment holds a different kind of absence. He has since established a relationship with his biological father, and his perspective on that reunion has been shaped significantly by his own marital failures. As he told the Today podcast, "Things happen. We have no hard feelings. We can have a relationship, but the guy that made me who I am is Sergeant Philip Arthur Harrison. Rest in peace." That statement does not just honor a man. It reveals how Shaquille O'Neal has been processing decades of complicated emotional history all at once. Grief, regret, forgiveness, and identity, colliding in the years after the roar of the crowd has faded. And that fading is real. The transition from being the most dominant player in the world to being a retired public figure is a shift that no amount of preparation fully covers. The structure of an NBA career, the schedule, the teammates, the daily purpose, disappears, and what fills that space is not always comfortable. O'Neal has stayed active through media work, business investments, endorsements, and public appearances. But the emotional texture of daily life is different when the game is gone. The weight struggles he experienced after retirement, the health scares that followed, and the personal reckoning happening in parallel. All of it paints a picture of a man navigating one of the most challenging phases of any elite athlete's life. What makes Shaquille O'Neal's current chapter genuinely compelling is not the struggle itself. It is how he is responding to it. He is not hiding behind old highlights or retreating into the armor of his legend. After turning 54 on March 6, he is showing a new side as a health advocate, being open about everything from the consequences of painkiller use during his playing career to his efforts to reclaim his physical health. He is talking honestly about sleep apnea on national platforms. He is reflecting publicly on his role in the end of his marriage. He is speaking with measured gratitude about the man who raised him and with surprising grace about the man who did not. None of that is the behavior of someone surrendering to difficulty. It is a behavior of someone confronting it, which, in its own way, is as impressive as anything he did between the lines of a basketball court. The legend of Shaquille O'Neal, the 4 rings, the shattered backboards, the era-defining dominance, remains exactly as it was. Nothing that comes after can diminish what he achieved. But the man living that legacy today is more layered, more vulnerable, and more human than the Superman mythology ever allowed him to appear. He is facing health battles that require the kind of quiet endurance a block shot or a thunderous dunk cannot supply. He is sitting with grief, reckoning with regret, and learning what strength looks like when the arena is empty. Things may not be easy for Shaquille O'Neal right now, but watching him face the complicated reality of life after greatness, with honesty and without retreat, suggests that the truest measure of the man is still very much being written.